Welcome to another episode of Mexican in the Kitchen. For this recipe you have to buy beans or broad beans, any kind you like. I buy them dry and I leave them soaking overnight, so maybe around 8 hours, 12 hours, just in some water. You can add also some baking soda if you want. These have been soaking and I can already feel how they are way softer, so it will make the cooking way easier. First of all, I'm gonna throw all the water away. I will rinse the beans several times. I will try to keep cleaning them with cold water. Just move them around, make sure you remove everything. If you have a strainer, it's also way easier. Just put them on a strainer, clean them up. Make sure, for example, I have these skins here. You can remove them, it doesn't hurt at all. After a few times, your beans will be ready and we can start cooking them. I have a pot here with some water. You can use around 2 liters of water per kilo of beans. For cooking the beans, I'm going to add some salt, and I'm going to add half an onion or a full onion if your onion is kind of small. After that, you can add your beans. We'll cook them around an hour or two. Just keep an eye on the pot, make sure they are cooked until they are soft, and make sure your water doesn't run out, because if that happens, they might get burned. For this recipe, I am using the blender, because it's kind of doing refried beans, but if you don't own a blender or you don't want to use a blender, you can make them also in the pan. I have another video where I do that. I'll leave the link in the description if you want to check that one out. I have my beans on the blender. I'm going to add a cube of chicken broth for seasoning. You can also use some vegetable ones if you prefer. And now we're going to blend this. You don't have to blend it for a very long time. It doesn't matter if it's a bit chunky, especially for this recipe. From the blender, I'm throwing my beans straight into a pan. This pan has nothing except for a bit of oil. It's on a medium fire, so 3 or 4 out of 6. You can see now that our beans are a bit watery, so the point is that we will be cooking this for a while until we get a paste kind of consistency. Make sure you keep mixing your beans, make sure you take everything from the bottom of the pan so they don't get burned. This process shouldn't take very long, it will probably take 10 minutes. And you will see how the consistency starts being like more and more thick every time. This is the end result. I used white beans, so that's why it has this color, but it's a bit like refried beans. It's like a paste, it tastes like refried beans, it's quite nice. We will use this to stuff our tlacoyos. I'm using this bowl to mix my corn flour. I'm using this blue corn flour from Naturelo. The flavor doesn't really change much, only the color changes, and the texture, the way to prepare it and everything should be exactly the same. Here on the flour I will add some salt and I will mix it immediately before adding the water. I am adding some water now, and for that I am using the exact same cup, because the secret for this dough is that you add the exact same amount of flour as you add of water. Water must be warm, close to hot, and we'll just start mixing with our hands. We want to make sure that the flour and the water get completely mixed, and once we get everything mixed together, then we will start kneading our dough. Sometimes you might think that it looks a bit dry or that it needs a bit more water, but just keep kneading, keep mixing the flour, and it will eventually get to the right consistency. The way you will know if your dough is ready is that your fingers and your hands will come out clean after kneading. If you're grabbing and kneading the dough and it doesn't stick to your fingers anymore, then it's ready. Once our dough is ready, we can start preparing our tlacoyos. My pan is hot, on a 4 out of 6. I grabbed a small piece of the dough and I made a tiny sphere. Now I'm going to try to flatten that up. You can just play with your hands, move it from one to the other, just slap it a bit, try to make it really thin as possible. This is a process that takes some practice, so the first times it won't look really nice, or it might be a bit difficult. You might find it that it sticks a bit on your fingers once it's too thin, but it's something that will get better every time. Here I have the beans I made, so I'm going to put them in the middle. The amount for the stuffing is also something you have to learn as you do. I think it's something that you will notice, that you need enough stuffing so that it comes all the way inside, but also not too much that when you close it, it will start coming out from the sides. You have to wrap it kind of like a taco. You have to make sure you start closing it slowly. Be careful that the stuffing won't come out. This is the first time I'm making this dish, so I can tell you that the first ones were not really nice looking. This is one of those. As you continue doing them, they will look way nice. Once you have wrapped the stuffing, we will start doing the same, that we will slap it, change it from hand to hand, try to make it as thin as possible. The shape and the size doesn't really matter, because in many places where you go around Mexico, you will find that they make them a bit smaller, a bit larger, more round, more of a longer shape, so it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the thickness is even throughout the whole thing. If not, you will have some sides that won't cook evenly. Also, the thinner you make it, the quicker it will be to cook. Now making sure that the thickness is even everywhere. And after that, I'm just going to throw it into the pan. And here we'll let it cook. For a while we'll check on it. You can see the edges that they start to cook. You can check it constantly depending on your pan and your stove. This took about a minute to cook. So you can flip it around. You will see it starts getting these brown spots. It starts to get really cooked. It starts getting crispy. You will smell the dough and the corn filling the air. It's quite nice smell. Now you will let it cook from the other side around the same time. Once it's ready, you can add a bit of oil to the pan. You can add it straight on top of your tlacoyo, or you can add it to the pan, and we will touch some of that oil. We will make sure that it will give it a bit of this extra crispy texture. In Mexico they will probably use some lard, which will also give a lot of flavor, but here I'm using canola oil and it also works quite nicely. After the oil, I will just give it a few seconds, and then you can flip it and do the same on the other side. I added some oil also, and I'm going to flip it into it. You will see how the color changed a bit. It has now a more of a crispy texture on the outside. The inside would still be a bit more soft. It gives a lot of texture to the dish. It's really nice. After a few seconds doing this, your tlacoyo will probably be ready and we can already serve it. If you are not going to serve them right away, you can skip the step with the oil, and then later when you're going to warm them up, you can do the oil then, and that way it's going to be way easier to store them. For that, if you just wrap them on a kitchen towel, put them in a plastic bag, you can keep them on the fridge and they will preserve quite okay. This is our tlacoyo. It's a word that comes from Nahuatl. It's what the Aztecs used to speak. Some people still do, and it basically means corn empanada, so it's corn that has something inside. There's a few ways to prepare this, but I would say this is the most simple one. You will add some hot sauce. If the sauce is a bit too spicy, you can just add a few drops, but usually these sauces are homemade and they're not super spicy, so you can use a lot of it to give just flavor. You can add a few drops of sour cream or creme fraiche just to balance the flavors a bit. You will add some fresh onion, finely chopped. You can add some fresh cheese on top. I use this fresh cheese or feta kind of salad cheese. Now our tlacoyos are ready to eat. You can also add some cactus salad on top. You can add some steak on top. Basically, you can use it as a base for any kind of dish, kind of like a tortilla. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Try it at home. Press like, subscribe, activate the bell, all those kind of things. Leave a comment if you have questions or suggestions, and see you in the next one.